You want to hear about the Joker? Well, I've had this question a lot today from people who come in and they're like, what was it like working with Joaquin? Now, if you've seen the movie, you saw how deeply disturbing his performance was. And in order to do that as an actor, you can't sort of slip in and out of it. So I would go to work in the morning, I'd be in the makeup chair, he'd be sitting there, and we'd say good morning, and what'd you do last night? Oh, I went and saw some music, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then he'd leave. And at that point, until we wrapped, we didn't speak. Only him and the director talked. He stayed in character. He was Arthur Fleck, or as the costumer said, Mark Bridges, I think his name. He's Academy Award winner. He's like, oh, I've worked with Joaquin. He likes doing movies where he can be miserable. So he stayed in that world, which was disturbing and upsetting and sad and brilliant at the same time. The whole movie. Then I go to the premiere thinking, wonder what that's going to be like. And we had to do everyone had done the red carpet, and him and Todd showed up. They said they want everyone out there, and we're walking back to do it for the the paparazzi. And I go, hey. And he looks and goes, oh my God, Brad! And he's hugging me, and it's like I didn't know who this guy was. And I've only had that twice in my career. I did a movie called Puncture with Chris Evans. And the same thing, and I'm one of those guys, I go up, like, there's no one here, so I just step out and start talking, right? Chris wouldn't talk to me. I forced myself on him all the time. And then we opened the Tribeca Film Festival with that movie, and he comes running out of the theater and picks me up. Going, oh my God, you're so great. And I'm like, who are you? But that was a little bit like Joaquin. I mean, at the premiere, he was really lovely. Really generous with his time, and he's very, very, very humble. He's not, I find most really great actors are pretty humble because we're all in pursuit of one thing, which is sort of playing a character that's truthful, that's real, that's not acting, They kind of live it. And I've been fortunate enough in my career to work with Gene Hackman and Bobby Duvall and Cesar Romero, the original Joker. And they're all, I find their true gift is wanting the work to be the best it can. I mean, Rosemary Harris, I worked with Gene Simmons, who was in with Brando and Guys and Dolls, and she would like, is my accent okay? And I was like 26. I'm like, yeah, I think so. I don't know. It's like, you're Gene Simmons. But that's how sort of humble they are. And when I saw him at the premiere, and I said, well, I'll see you in February at the Oscars, he went, no, don't say that. He's just so shy about it. And everyone I know is like, no, that guy's going to win an Oscar. He's going to win the Oscar. And I'm glad he did. The movie, I thought should have gotten more accolades, but some people thought it was disturbing. But it is disturbing. It's a movie about mental health. And my aunt, who was a doctor of political science that taught at Rice University, was chemically imbalanced. But when she would have a fit or have something go off, they'd take her down to the sanitarium in Galveston, because I grew up in Houston, and give her shock treatment. And then my mom and I would go visit her, and she's sitting there drooling, and this brilliant woman that today, if they gave her a Paxil, she'd have been fine. But you go back to the 80s, and you say, okay, what's going on in New York, in particular in the 80s, which I know I was there, how crazy it was, and how they kind of walked away from people. I mean, Ronald Reagan, I did a movie in D.C. with Martin Sheen, and and he had that park that faces the White House, the back part of it, all the tunnels where the heat comes up covered so the homeless would go away, because he didn't want to look at them. And that kind of goes to the Joker in the sense of what was going on in that period and that history and time, which is we didn't care about mental health. They were crazy, or they were veteran, and a couple of guys that worked, I think, with Martin Sheen were like 4-time Purple Heart, guys from Vietnam that were living on the street, and they had drug problems and alcohol problems, PTSD, and we just turned a blind eye to it. So that's, I kind of think what Todd was trying to do with this movie is to say to us, there's value in recognizing mental illness. There's value in trying to help people, if you want to go to the veterans, people who've actually sacrificed a lot for our country versus just a normal human being who deserves the respect and the ability to be treated with whatever medicines they need, and they didn't back then. So, I mean, I think that's why Todd did this, and I think it's a really apropos movie for what's going on in the world today, sort of how we're all separated and everyone's like Republican, Democrat. No one's going to do anything for America if it's not good for their donors or their party. So Todd's very smart, our director. You know, we all think about the Hangover movies, which are brilliant, or at least the first one was brilliant. But then you look at him doing this, and that's the thing about being an actor. Is Mark Bridges, the costumer, and I did this really horrible independent movie years and years ago when, you know, I was broke, I needed a job. It was a horrible movie about baby dinosaurs. It was horrible. Some people liked it, kids liked it. And then I go to New York, and Mark's won 2 Oscars, and I walk into, and you know, these kind of movies are the greatest. You don't go to a fitting room. I went to De Niro's tailor, who built my suits, and I'm like, whoa. And I see Mark, and he goes, oh my God, Brett Cullen. He goes, we did that awful movie together. And I went, yeah, we did. And he goes, we're still here, honey, you know, and we are. You know, it's a long career. I've worked for 41 years as an actor in Hollywood, you know. I don't know how often I've worked in Hollywood in the last 20 years, but, you know, you're always on location. I was in Bogota on Narcos. I was in Arkansas on True Detective. You know, I finally got a series starting in May that shoots in L.A. First time since Falcon Crest. I mean, you know, you think about that stuff. But I'm really proud of The Joker. I think it's a movie that I believe, like Taxi Driver does, it will maintain. Like, you watch that 20 years from now and you're going to go, what an incredible film. Deer Hunter, you watch it today and you go, what an incredible film. There's some things, I mean, I was in the Thornbirds. It was in 1980, 81 we shot that. And I see it now and I'm like, ooh, it doesn't quite hold up. You know, the makeup and, like, because I aged from 16 to 60 in it. Played one of the brothers. And it looks like a high school production, you know, because they never did the coverage. They would big wide shots, and there's this 26-year-old kid out there acting like I'm 60 years old, you know, and it's like bad, no, wrong. But, you know, there's things that you do. Like Apollo 13 is another film I did, and I see it today, and I still cry. And I was in it, you know, and when you finally see it breaks the atmosphere. You're like, yeah, oh God, they made it, you know, and I'm like, I was in the movie. My wife looks at me, and she was in the movie. She goes, you still cry every time we watch. I'm like, I know, but it's a great movie. And you know, and then, did you do that? Did you move those lights? All right. He's an idiot. That's okay. I'll beat up Byron later. He's at the hotel taking a shower. Because I said, where are you? And he goes, I'm taking a shower. Come on, man. We're going to that party at 8 o'clock. And I'm like, I'm doing a Q&A. Anyway, yeah. Well, from a sentimental value, Apollo 13 is probably my favorite film that I did because my wife and I were married, and she met with Ron Howard. She was auditioning for it, and she looks up and she sees my photo above his, you know, on the wall, and he goes, well, what are you looking at? And she goes, that's my husband. He goes, oh, he's going to be on my movie. And then I got cast. I got an offer. And then it's the only time, we've been together since 1984, that she was mad that she hadn't gotten a job. And I said, you just met on it. Just relax. 2 days later, she gets an offer. But for 3 days, I was getting that you should sleep on the couch routine. You know, it's like, I'm like, but that movie, because, you know, my friend Bill Paxton, who I was really close with, was in it. Tom Hanks was my introduction to him. And I worked with Tom again later. He hired me just out of the blue. Really great guy. And what not many people realize, in shooting that film, the first 8 weeks was shooting in Mission Control. We shot all that stuff you saw in Mission Control the first 8 weeks. And Tom and Kevin and Bill sat in a room and did the off-camera. And they weren't even on salary yet. And then when we finished, I said to Ron, because I'm the one that talked to them most of the time, I was the Capcom, I said, I'd like to be there for them. So I did it for about a month. And then Ronnie, and it's because there were a lot of guys, if you remember, if you ever go back and watch Apollo 13, you'll see the cast. And it's like actors that are working like today all the time, right? And he goes, hey, Brett, there was a lot of guys in Mission Control. And I said, and they didn't get a lot to do. And I said, no, they didn't. And he said, would you mind if they did your role for a while? I said, they want to do off camera for me? They go, yeah. And I went, sure. And so I was done. I got to leave. But the great thing about the movie, though, my wife got pregnant with our daughter on that film. And I had just wrapped, and she shot actually longer on it than I did and ended up with 3 lines. Because there was a lot that they shot about the women. But once they got in the editing room, they realized the movie was about those men in the capsule and these men on the ground trying to save their lives. And Tom's wife, obviously, and my wife was the blonde that was always with Kathleen Quinlan. If you ever see it again, she looked kind of like Joey Heatherton. And she had this short little blonde bob. But that's my wife. Her name is Michelle Little. So the reason that's favorite is because and my best friend was a unit publicist on the movie. He was my roommate. So it was like going to work every day. I was hanging out with my friends, and Ed Harris is great. I just saw Ed in New York. And, it was just one of those things where you kind of go, that's magic in a bottle. I don't know if you'll get that again. But it was, and then you look at the finished product. The movie is amazing. And I have a 24-year-old daughter, because I remember that Saturday morning, I was a little frisky. It's like, But that's probably one of my favorites. Is people ask me that a lot, and sometimes it's like, I did a miniseries. It was terrible, but I had more fun on that than probably anything I ever did, because I was with friends. I got to shoot it in Texas, and it was a Western. So I didn't have to shave. I got to be, you could show up hungover because we go out drinking at night and you get on a horse and, it was just fun. So there's different reasons why different things are special. Joker, on the other hand, was a difficult film to shoot. It wasn't like I'd go to work, you go to work going like, oh man, it's going to be intense today. But then you see it and you go, that's worthwhile. You really pay a price for something to be brilliant. It just doesn't happen. You got to work really hard to find that. So anyway, I was going to say, I lived here. Who's from Virginia here? All right, I lived here 21 years ago. I did a series called Legacy for UPN. I'm really aging myself. Well, I aged myself with Thornbirds. But I did a series, and I lived here. I lived in the Fan. I rented a house. And in this house, I later went on and did Celebrity Ghost Stories. And then they brought me back with a psychic to the same house because it was haunted. I mean, there was a little girl and a woman that would stand on our doorway every night. My wife and the nanny both were like, yeah, you noticed her? And I'm like, what are y'all talking about? And then one night, I wake up, I hear something, and I think it's my daughter, comes out of her bedroom. We're in a shotgun Victorian, and I'm going, Harper, Harper. It's 3 a.m. And then the girl runs down the stairs, and I chase after her. Not there. I run back upstairs, and my daughter's sitting up in bed going, Daddy, I'm scared. And I went, oh, it's nothing. Lay down where they're going, girl in here. But I told that story. But it was interesting because that house was a surgeon's home. Because the man who rented it to me, took me and said, see right here by the big bay windows, there were 2 holes. And I said, what is that? And he goes, well, this is where he operated. Because the light was better. So, but one thing I love about Richmond, 21 years ago, I never was in a traffic jam. Ever. And, living in L.A., it's like, or in Houston or anywhere, you're like, oh, there's traffic. There, I was like, oh, go to Tuckahoe. Nobody there. Leave, nobody, no traffic. So I dug living here. It was fun. And now you guys are a real food town. You weren't 21 years ago. And my assistant still lives here. She's a nurse and has kids, so I'm going to see her tomorrow. All right, any other questions? You guys got to have some questions. There is no such thing as a stupid question. I tell that to my acting students.
When you do a role on TV like Lost, do you have to know what the backstory is, or do you have any idea where it's going to go, where it's going to end up, or do they just...
Well, I've been doing The Blacklist this year. And the creator, actually I did the finale last season. It was 2 scenes out in Long Island. They flew me in for 1 day. I shot both scenes. But in order, when I did this, the creator, John Bowenkamp, called me. I'm like, doing 2 scenes. It's like, gives me this whole backstory. And then when we finished those 2 scenes, James looked at me and goes, I'll see you next season. And I'm like, they don't have a deal. Are you really, And I've done 7 this year so far. they gave me backstory. When I did Lost, if you read the first episode I did, which was called The Other 48 Days in the second season, and it's the catch-up of the first season of what happened with the tail section. And there was in the script, it's me and Michelle Rodriguez are supposed to be flirting. There's this whole sexual tension between us, but no one told me anything. And Michelle would show up not knowing her lines because she's a feature actor. She'd be like, hey, man, I can't talk the way she does because she has a really, she has a salty tongue like I do, but I won't do it in front of you. But she wouldn't, and I'm like trying to play the subtleties of the scene, and she's not even picking up on the fact that I'm flirting with her. And so I go, okay, well, I'm going to make a choice that I don't know who the others are, but I take it, I'm going to kill everyone here except her. She's my breeder. Because I'm with the others. We're trying to populate the whatever. She's going to be my woman. That was what I was going to do. It turns out later, because they never explained it to me, but later like I did one episode, all of a sudden there's this actress I know, beautiful actress, and I'm like, oh, you were on the plane to Hawaii together. I said, what are you? And she goes, I'm playing your wife. I went, oh, I'm married because I've been having an affair with Juliet, the doctor, all these, in the flashbacks. So I'm like, oh. And she goes, yeah, you've been sleeping on the couch for a year because I know you're screwing that girl. And I'm like, oh, so they talked to you about it. She goes, no, I'm just making that up. But, but, they didn't, because I don't think the creators of that show, Carlton and all the other writers, they started out with an idea, but when they finished it, they never explained the black cloud that floated around. There were things they didn't explain because they just went somewhere because it was interesting, but then never thought to think, let's tie that together. I didn't even watch the final season because I was so angry. I was like, well, I don't know what happened. How did they get here? But no, to answer your question, sometimes you get that, and then sometimes you don't. And I was just in Houston with my dear friend Alan Rosenberg, who was president of the Screen Actors Guild for 2 terms. I took him there. I have a guest artist program to teach these students who don't know what the real world's going to be like when they graduate. So Alan and I were talking about that, where he turned to these kids and he goes, let me tell you something. You better learn how to self-direct yourself, particularly if you work in television. Because most TV shows, a director comes in for 1 or 2 episodes, and he wants to get hired again. So he wants to make his day. He doesn't want overtime, and he doesn't want any problems. So he's just setting shots up and moving, trying to get the day done. He's not walking up going, so how do you feel about this? Every once in a while you'll get one of those, but for the most part, most directors are like, let's go. And I did Falcon Crest, interesting story. I was, Annalisa, the second season, was my love interest, who was the dark-haired vixen bad girl on the show. And I had asked to work with her, and then I did something I've never done in my life, where I went up to an actor and I said, do you still study? Because I was working with a woman, you guys won't know who she is, and her name was Kim Stanley. She was an incredible actress. She was considered the female Marlon Brando in New York on stage. She did all the Tennessee Williams plays. She did everybody. And I was studying with her, and she was brilliant. And a lot of TV actors, when you work on a series for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, you get kind of stale. Keep just playing the same, The second season, that's why I left the show. I never even read a script. I was just so like, what am I doing? The love scene, let me see it. Oh, yeah, same as last week. Oh, this line's changed. It was like, it was sort of by rote. We'd shoot 14 pages a day, which is a lot. So I went to her and said, and then she kind of like, what are you talking about? And I eventually convinced her to study with Kim. And she did, and then we started working together. And as they would do, they walk in, okay, blocking, great. All right, and she'd go, wait, I want to rehearse this. I went, what? And he goes, can you just step back and let Brett and I work? And so it changed her approach to the work, and also made me feel like all of a sudden we were actually 2 actors trying to create something in a scene, as opposed to just saying the lines and hitting our marks, and they got the shots, So that, you run up against different stuff, but primarily you got to know how to self-direct yourself. As I tell actors, I know I say I don't audition as an actor. And they go, well, yeah, you don't have to. And I said, no, I still audition, but I perform. I go in and show them how I want to play a role. But I also have 5 other versions in my back pocket, and the director says, that's a little intense. Could you maybe bring it a bit, lighten that up? Or I go, yeah. And then I do that, and they go, wow, that's a nice adjustment. And I get the part, right? So, but my wife said, I'm the hardest working guy she knows, because if I have an audition, I'll be up until 4 in the morning for a 10 o'clock audition, making sure I have that down. That's how much I care about my craft and about the work that I do and the business that I'm in. Because there are a lot of actors that are more talented than I am, but they don't work as hard as I do. So, anyway, there's that. What other questions, you guys, besides that? Yes, sir.
What role has been the most challenging?
Pardon me?
What role has been the most challenging for you?
I think Thomas Wayne was a very challenging role for me because you can look at it as it's Trump. You know, it's that kind of a powerful man. But I thought of it differently than that. So I had to work with Todd to find sort of a middle ground where he's a very, very powerful man who loves his family, but also makes mistakes. And as powerful men do who make mistakes, they have to cover their tracks. You know, if I have an illegitimate son, that's not going to wash very well with my wife or my family. So I take care of that. So it was a fine line there. I mean, listen, I played, and this is a true story, I played a serial rapist, a real serial rapist. And I turned it down until they finally, I said, you don't explain this character. And they wrote a scene for me at the end. And he was because he was a psychopath. And basically it was just him sitting there smoking a cigarette with the light on, and he goes, why? You want to know why? I'll tell you why. Because I can. You know, and I went, oh, I'll do that. That's great, because you know he's crazy, right? And I mean, his wife was on Oprah. It's like, you know, this guy went to prison for a long time. He had 2 kids. But so, you find stuff sometimes that's difficult to do. Do you need me to leave, or is that why you're looking at me? Okay, all right. It's like, is my time up? Okay. But every role is a challenge. I mean, if you take it seriously, I mean, there are actors, and Alan and I were talking about this in Houston, about people who've just disappeared, actors you've seen for years, and they just don't work anymore. And either it's because they've been kicked around enough, and they're tired of it, and they get their pension, because the screen actors go, pension's very nice at 65. They just go, screw it. Or they're actors who don't look at every role as a challenge. They think, oh, I got this. You know, I've done this enough. I know I'm good enough, you know, and they don't continue to learn. I think actors that continue to learn and grow as artists keep working. Those that stop. Yes?
Is there anything you haven't done that you want to do?
I want to be on Broadway. I'd love to do a show on Broadway. I've never done that.
You sing?
Huh? Yeah. I sang on 3 Meatloaf albums. I did. He's the godfather of my daughter. But I used to do musicals when I was young. I mean, now I've smoked cigars for way too many years. But, you know, I can do Rusty Charlie, you know, and Guys and Dolls. You know, I can do character voices, you know, but I can sing. Give me a guitar and blues, I'll do something for you. But also, if I was going to do something like that, I'd quit smoking and I'd really train my voice, because you're doing 8 shows a week. And, you know, Meatloaf, when he performs, like he was in Vegas doing like a, what do you call it, where he's there. And he didn't talk except Saturday night. I went to visit him, and I'm like, come on, really? And he's like, and he'd write stuff down. And he had 12 humidors in his apartment, you know, and I'm like, dude, it's like a sauna in here, or a steam room, because his voice, because it's so dry there. And if you know his music, he's like, and I will do it. You know, he's like belting all this stuff. And his voice can't take it, particularly at his age now. He's not singing now. But so, yeah, I would love to do that. I would love to do that. And there's some movies that I've written that I want to produce. One about my father that's really close to my heart, because it's one of the beautiful things my dad did in his lifetime with the Native Americans in the oil business. So something that I paid, Meatloaf and I actually paid a guy to write the script, great writer Mark Sprague. But it's expensive to do a period piece in the late 40s, early 50s. All the cars have to, you know, shooting all over D.C., Houston, Montana, because it was with the Blackfoot Indians. But someday I'd like to make that movie. I probably won't act in it. I'd love to, you know, produce it or direct it. I've written a movie about my brother who has dementia now. My mom died of dementia. And I wrote the script about him that I really, really love to do. And that's a little tiny movie. I just got to find a couple $1 million and go make that. Who knows who will see it? You know, maybe I'll sell it at Sundance or something. But that's probably, you know, I mean, I just want to keep working and growing. That's all I want. I don't really care. You know, I just find that the gift that's been given to me to be able to make a living doing what I love to do is probably one of the coolest things that could happen to a human being. and the fact that I have a loving wife who I've been with since 1984 and a 24-year-old daughter who's a pain in my butt, but is an immensely talented actress as well. And I try and support her in her dream, which pisses my wife off because she's like, keep giving her money, wouldn't she? And I said, look, she lives in our guest house. She's already made some money. She blew it like I did when I started, and something good will happen. But this generation is a little lazier than the generation I come from. They want the work, but they don't want to do the work to get the work. You know what I mean? So that's what I teach. I'm like, if you really want this, that's why I go to my alma maters. These kids are like doing Shakespeare and all this stuff, and I'm like, that's all wonderful, and you should continue to do that your entire career, because I did 4 seasons with the Shakespeare Company, and it's what makes what I do now easier, because if you can do Hamlet, and you can do The Scottish Play, or you can do, As You Like It, or Comedy of Errors, and you learn those lines, to walk in and go, honey, where were you last night? Oh, okay. Yeah, would you give me a drink? It's like doing Shakespeare compared to that is easy. And Ed Asner was the one that taught me that when I was in college. I went to visit him in California because of a girlfriend and had a brunch with him. He wouldn't talk to me. I was just like the lump in the corner, right? Until finally at the end of the brunch, he went, so I understand you want to be an actor, kid. I told him the story because we were on the Screen Actors Guild National Board together later, years later. I said, yes, sir. And he goes, Shakespeare. Do a lot of Shakespeare. I said, why? He goes, if you can do that, this shit's easy. Excuse my language. But that's what he said. And I went, okay. So I did 4 seasons with a company. So, I just think it's a wonderful thing. I think it's great to come here and meet you people and to talk to people. And, how bad is it to sit somewhere and just chat, even if you're not making any money, but to talk to people and they talk about how much they enjoy your work. And they're thankful you're here. It's a very nice, flattering thing. And then I go home with a smile on my face going, someone saw my work. I don't think of like I said, Dennis Quaid's my best friend. We grew up together. If Dennis was here, everyone would be going, oh, Dennis Quaid. I walk through and people go, I've seen that guy somewhere, which is kind of how I like it, because I surf all the time and I golf all the time and I travel. I've traveled all over the world surfing. And people they go, you? And I go, yeah, I work as a stuntman. And they go, but you look like. I actually played golf. I just finished a movie with Hugh Jackman called The Jade Earrings in New Orleans, and this producer I did this show called The Young Riders with lives there. He's retired, and we went and played TPC Louisiana, where they have the big tournament, PGA Tour. So we're playing, and afterwards we're having lunch, and one of the guys that worked with me on this series I did in New Orleans called Orleans with Larry Hagman. He had been like set decorating or something. This other guy comes in and joins us, and Chris Morgan, it's Harry Morgan's son. You remember Harry Morgan, who was the Colonel Potter on MASH? He looks just like him, it sounds like. He's sitting here, and this guy's sitting here, and I'm right here, and this guy and his wife are over here, and I hear Chris start laughing, and he goes, it is him. And they go, what? And he just looked at me and goes, that guy looks just like Brett Cullen. And he goes, it is Brett Cullen. It's like, and I'd worked with him too. But, that's the weird thing about my business is you work so much with so many different people that I think there's been one show in the last 30 years I haven't walked on set and known somebody. Really, know them. And that was in South Africa. I was shooting in South Africa, which is another country I loved. And my driver is still my friend. We talk on Facebook all the time. He was one of the children that started apartheid. Guy was big. His head was twice my size. And he was that big as a kid. His wife told me they had to have like 4 dogs because they would attack the kids, because they were striking, basically. They need 4 German Shepherds to take him down because he was so big. But Hodges was his name, or is his name. He's my buddy. But so, I've been really fortunate. I wouldn't say lucky because I worked hard to have what I have. But I think that doing quality work, even when you have a mediocre script, that's another thing Charles Durning told me once. He said, my job isn't to fix the script. My job is to make bad writing look good. That's the old school, and that's kind of what I am. So, yes, sir.
So how hard has it been to balance artistic satisfaction with the temptation of job security?
The temptation of what?
Job security.
Well, I know I've done jobs that I didn't want to do because I had a mortgage, and I had a daughter and a wife, and I needed to support them. The key is you have to balance that out. Some people aren't as fortunate as I am. They keep doing crap because that's all they can get, or they're one of the things I've always wanted to do was to maintain that I would never become a bitter a-hole. You know, that I just wanted to be grateful for what I have and keep learning. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why I still work. Because I don't have a big ego or a chip on my shoulder. I'm just kind of like, you know, I still think I'm 18 years old in the University of Houston drama department. Like, whoa, what's that? How do you do that? You know, I'm curious, and I want to be that guy still, even though I'm 63 years old. And I keep getting ready to do a big job. It's probably going to run for between 2 to 6 years on HBO. But, you know, it'd be a nice gig. It's going to help me out financially. But on the other hand, I still want to keep trying to learn in that process. But yeah, you've got to, you know, my daughter, I want to do what you do. And she got a national commercial. Paid her almost $90,000. And she was bitching about it. And I said, you have $90,000. And now she's like, oh yeah, commercials are great. You know, so, you know, it's like that thing where you think, and that's what I tell actors, I go, take your blinders off. You know, I was hired in an art show to be a character on stage in a wrestling ring while this poetry goes on and music's played, me and this guy with a mask or pretend wrestling. And it was great. Well, that's not what I want to do, but it was an interesting experience. So experience everything. And as I always say to every actor I know, I say, there's doors that are going to open for you in your life. It doesn't take any effort to walk through that door, and it doesn't take any effort to walk back out. You know, if you don't like it, don't stay. If it's something that interests you, explore it, and then move on to something else. You know, so it's a tough business. I'm going to finish with this. This is an actor's career. It goes like this, right? And I tell every actor I know, learn how to live here, right in the middle. And I say, if you got a series, they go, oh yeah, I'm going to be big. I go, okay, well great, but don't buy that Porsche yet. Wait until you've done 3 seasons under your belt, and you're making your money, and they're renegotiating. Then move out of the apartment and maybe rent a house. Don't buy it yet. You know, it's like save your money because you go through periods as an actor. I mean, there have been times where I thought, there's probably 3 times I seriously sat down with my wife because I have this house that we bought. I live in Venice Beach. That's just the stock. I mean, the real estate prices have gone insane. My house is worth 5 times more than I paid for it. I mean, I could sell it and retire. And we talked about saying, should we sell the house? And I don't want to because it's got my 5 surfboards in it, and I'm right by the beach. I want to live there the rest of my life. But I thought, well, if I have to, that's a possibility. And as much as I work, we've discussed selling that house 3 times. There have been times when I had my old house, I didn't know I could pay the mortgage, and then a residual check would come in for $3,500. Oh my God, I can pay the mortgage. It's not all like, there's a lot of stress in what we do, and people all assume because you work in television or film that you're rich. Tom Hanks is rich. Dennis Quaid is rich. I make a living, you know, and I'm happy with it. I don't, and I don't know, maybe it was you, someone I was talking about Mahershala Ali, and they were talking to me about True Detective, and I said, the thing about Mahershala is he appreciates where he is right now. And he's one of the kindest, sweetest men you've ever met in your life. He came to work, and he was working 18-hour days every day because he was the star of that. And he'd walk in, and he'd say hello to every crew member. How's your wife? Oh, is your kid still sick? You know, great, man. I'm okay, well, I'll say a prayer for her. And then we'd work all day. And even though he was exhausted, he said goodnight to everybody. And he was kind. And I think that's because he got his real success in his early 40s. If it had happened to me when I was 23, I would have been a nightmare. I would have crashed and burned because I was such an idiot, you know. But then you season, you get seasoned, and you watch pros, and you watch how people do stuff, and you're like, I want to, you know, like Gene Hackman. I worked with Gene Hackman, who's my idol, and he was so great. I go to set every night, and they go, what are you doing here? You're not shooting. And I went, I don't have time for acting class. I'm not home to be in a class, and he's one of the greatest actors of my generation. So I'd sit there with the headphones on, sitting at the monitor and just watching. Watch him do the master, watch him do the overages, watch him do his close-up, watch him do the extreme close-up, and how he adjusted to the camera and just his internal mechanism, you know, where his heart was and what he was expressing to me or to the audience. That was my class, and I was blessed to be able to work with him. I worked with Duvall, I worked with Jenna Rollins. So, you know, it's like when you work with great actors, watch them, you know? I mean, if you're a baseball player and you have the opportunity to work with, you know, Nolan Ryan, you know, as a coach, go, yeah, hello, I'll take that. As opposed to like, oh. It was great. One night, I'll finish with this. Last night Gene was shooting. We were in Baltimore. And all the brothers came, you know, all the guys. Michael, who's in prison now, and, you know, he got in trouble. He stabbed his girlfriend or something. But there was all these guys, and they were all going out. And they said, Brett, come on, man, we're going to go out. We're going to go out and have dinner. And I said, what are you doing here? And they said, well, we come by to say goodbye to Gene. They said, come with me. And I said, no. They said, why? And I said, I want to watch him. I want to learn. And Michael, he was the one that played the convict. I don't know if you ever saw The Replacements. He was the badass. And he's a great guy. He had a bad night, and he's paid for it now. But he literally went like this. They were all going, come on, let's go. And, you know, oh, and all the guys were like, what? And I said that to him, and he went, and they kept yelling his name, and he looked at me, and he just went, and he walked away. And I know to this day he regretted leaving. But because of peer pressure, they all want to go out and party. As opposed to saying, you know what, when I'm not working, I can drink or smoke or do whatever I want. But if I'm working and I get the opportunity to be around greatness, why would I waste my time doing anything else? So, you know, Orlando Jones is one of the funniest men I know. Do you know who Orlando is? This guy, you know, he's managed to have a great career. He's a little bit like me, you know, and he was the same way with me. He was like, he'd say, do Gene for me, do Gene for me. I said, no one can imitate him. He said, what do you mean? I said, dude, you just imitate him, because Orlando's a great mimic. And he couldn't do it. I said, no one can. I said, have you ever watched TV shows? You know how comedians always do, like you can do De Niro, you can do Brando, you can do this. No one does Gene Hackman. Why? You can't, because he's different in everything he does. And he's brilliant and was a great guy. Great guy. So, but thank you for, anyone have one last question? I got to go, because I don't want to bore y'all anymore with my ramblings. Anyone else?
I was wondering, you were talking about how you've written a couple of screenplays. What your advice might be with the best way of getting that recognized, getting that seen?
She's not here. There was a girl who's a writer came today and talked to me, and I'll tell you two quick stories. One is, if you're going to write a script, write everything you have in your head, everything. Don't like go, oh, it's got to do this. Write it out. And it may be 200 pages, because the script's got to be about 100, 110 pages max. Write it all, and then set it down, go do something for a couple months, and come back to it and look at it and start cutting the story you want to tell. Like, you know, all the stuff you wanted to put in there isn't necessarily going to move the story forward. Everything has to, like every play, every movie has a spine. And everything that happens in it is attached to that spine. So go through it and figure out what moves the story forward. Now, in terms of getting that's what I said to her. I said, go online, look up all the lit agencies in Los Angeles and New York. Look up your favorite actors. Like, you know, Octavia Spencer and I did this show called Truth Be Told for for Apple Plus. And she has a production company. And she's a woman of color. And I said to this young girl, I said, you have two things going for you. You're a woman, and you're a woman of color. And in this day and age, and in our industry, they're looking for that. They're looking for Hispanic and black and Asian writers and directors, because they need that diversity, because they've been hammered for it. And I said, this is the time to strike. But what you would do is just send it to everyone with a cover letter. You're going to get a lot of nothings from nobody, but you might one day get a call from Octavia Spencer's producer, who says, you know, we read the script. It's really interesting. Can you fly to L.A. and have a meeting? Doesn't mean it's going to get made. I mean, I sold 2 movies just to Orion and Universal just on a pitch. And they both got put in turnaround, but I got paid. So it's the beginning of, you know, I'm in the Writers Guild too. But I'm going to tell you a really quick story, and then I really am going to go. Like I said, I'll ramble all night. Years ago, in the 80s, my wife did a movie called My Demon Lover. I don't know if anyone ever saw that. It was with Scott Valentine, and it's about a guy who's cursed by a gypsy on the subway in New York because he said something, and she curses him so that whenever he falls in love, he'll turn into a monster. He falls in love with my wife, Michelle. So he's always turning into a monster. It's kind of a comedy. So he's there. We were shooting at Hollywood General, and they were shooting nights. Now, in 1981, 82, Hollywood was a little bit like Times Square was back in the 80s. It was scary. So they had a PA at every trailer outside the studio where they sat, and they were shooting nights. So I went there because I wanted to be with my girlfriend. She was my girlfriend at the time. And just smoked cigarettes and talked to this guy named John. Got his, you know, because I asked people, what's your story? Who are you? Where are you from? He goes, well, I'm from Austin. I said, really? And he goes, yeah, I'm a lawyer. I said, you're a lawyer? He goes, yeah, I went to UT Law, graduated, passed the bar, got into a law firm. Lasted 4 months. Called my dad and said, Dad, I cannot, excuse the language, his quote, I can't do this shit. I want to be a writer. So he moved to Hollywood. And he was a PA, probably making maybe $120 a week, standing in front of my wife's trailer. And I spent, and I said, what do you want? He goes, I want to write. And I said, then write. He said, well, I said, just write. Write every story you can. Just keep writing. Tenacity is my favorite word. Don't take no for an answer. Just keep doing it, because one day, and this goes for actors too, one day, even if you're a talentless idiot, you'll get a break. And you have to be ready. You have to have your artistic muscles in tune and ready, right? So cut to, I don't know, 12 years later, 15 years later, Dennis Quaid, my friend, gets cast and offered this movie called The Rookie, about this baseball pitcher. Played in the majors, throws his arm out, goes and teaches science or something at a small town in Texas, and has a baseball team he coaches and gets back into the majors. And I'm pissed. I'm like, I can't believe you got that role. I mean, I played baseball. You've never even thrown a baseball. I taught him how to pitch, actually, for the movie. We were in Dodger Stadium all the time. So, and I'm mad, and he knows it. So people know my wife and I. It's like my wife, if anyone calls me at 11 o'clock at night, it either better be an emergency or something, or you're going to pay a price, because she's Scottish. And she's Scottish Canadian. So my phone rings 11 o'clock at night, and I answer it. And she goes, that's Dennis. I go, hello? He goes, hi, what are you doing? I said, I'm in bed with Michelle. What's going on? He goes, well, I just had dinner with the producer and this is my last, I'm out, producer and the director of The Rookie. The first words out of my mouth are going to be, you know who should be in this movie is Brett Cullen. They sit down, the director looks at Dennis, he goes, you know who I want in this movie? He goes, who? And he goes, Brett Cullen. And Dennis starts laughing. He goes, why are you laughing? Isn't he your best friend? He goes, yeah. He goes, but how do you know him? He goes, you know how you know him, Brett? He was that PA that worked on Michelle's movie. And that was John Lee Hancock. You know who John Lee Hancock is? He did The Rookie. I mean, he's done so many, he did The Alamo. He's done a bunch. He's a big writer, director in Hollywood. But you never know. He kept writing. And he got good at it. Now, obviously, you want to be good. But anyway, they're telling me to wrap it up. I want to thank you all for coming out and listening to me. And just keep it up.